Welcome to Science Frontiers, a space for discussions in the frontier areas of science and technology. I am your host, Vinay Panda. The idea behind Science Academies is not just to have organizations for the promotion of science and technology, but for a much larger goal, which is to mobilize scientists to play a leading role in our society's development and help citizens develop a scientific ethos. Today, in a special episode, we shall discuss about Science Academies, their role in the society, and whether the Science Academies in India have actually succeeded in fulfilling this role with our guest, Partha Majumder. Partha is a National Science Chair and a distinguished professor at the National Institute of Biomedical Genomics and the immediate past president of the Indian Academy of Sciences in Bangalore. Partha, welcome to the forum and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Binay, for inviting me. Thank you very much.
To begin with, let's start with a bit of a history. As we all know, there is not one, not two, but three science academies in India. The oldest one, the National Academy of Sciences, or NASI, set up by Meghnad Sai in 1930, based out of Allahabad. Then the Indian Academy of Sciences, started by C.V. Raman in 1934, which is based out of Bangalore, for which you served as an immediate past president. And finally, the Indian National Science Academy, or INSA, founded in 1935, which is based out of Delhi. Can you tell our viewers, to start with, why did India set up three separate science academies and how each of these function?
All right. So first of all, I must start with the disclaimer, which is that whatever I'm going to say, except for the facts and historical facts, etc., my opinion are my opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of any of the academies. My perceptions are my own perceptions as to what the academies do and what they should do. So that's the disclaimer. Why are there three science academies in India? It's a kind of an historical fact. Again, not all of it is very pleasant. Some of it is kind of murky in the sense that there were stalwarts in the 1930s who propelled science in India. And they also felt that science should be taken to the masses. Science should be used for public good. Science and scientists should help the government run the country, etc. But then, these were people who were stalwarts, and they had their own ways of thinking, their own egos, I might say. And so this happened that, three different people, well, actually two different people, very, very eminent scientists, set up the two academies. And the National Academy of Sciences, which used to be called the National Academy of Sciences, now called the Indian National Science Academy, is kind of the official organ right now of the government of India. Although all three science academies are actually funded by the government of India in terms of collaboration with other science academies, foreign science academies, official engagements, it's done through the Indian National Science Academy.
Can you please tell our viewers, how does a science academy work? How the organization look like, and what's the day-to-day activities of the people who are involved with science academies?
Okay, so the hierarchy of each of the science academies is that it has a president, and it has a secretary. Sometimes it has a secretary and an executive secretary. Sometimes there are two secretaries, etc. And then you have a council, and there are a bunch of members of the council. Of course, there is a treasurer and other such office bearers. So that's essentially the structure of the academy. Who forms the academy? The essentially scientists of the country form the academy. Is every scientist in the country a member of any of the three academies? The answer is no. Because the membership of the science academies, often called the fellowship of the science academies, is by election. You need to be, if you have done science well, somebody needs to recognize that. Two or three people need to recognize that. They need to nominate you to the to one or more of the science academies, and then the council looks at. Well, there are groups that look at what your contributions to science have been. How you have served the nation, and overall they make a judgment about your contributions to science. And it's of course competitive because there are more nominees every year than the number of slots that are open. So it is very highly competitive, and eventually a few of the scientists get in as members or fellows of the academy every year. So each of the science academies has exactly the same process, and this fellowship comprises the bulk of the academy, comprises the people who are members of the academy, who actually propel the academy forward. You also asked, what do they do on a day-to-day basis? What do they do? As a matter of fact, on a day-to-day basis, not very much is done. In the sense that it's not, the fellows are not engaging with the academy on a daily basis, nor is the president or the secretary engaging with the academy on a daily basis. There is for the Indian Academy of Sciences, there is an executive secretary who engages with the academy on a daily basis. He is looking after the administrative affairs of the institute, of the academy, and then there are questions from the government and so on and so forth. So that's all handled by the executive secretary. The fellows of the academy participate in various activities of the academy. I'm not going to mention all of the activities that we participate in. So also I'm going to focus on the Indian Academy of Sciences, the academy that I know the best because for the reason that I've served as the president. So the Indian Academy of Sciences, well, first of all, let me tell you what the three academies together do. The three academies have actually sliced out certain kinds of activities which are their own niche area so that there is no stamping on each other's toes. So, for example, the Indian Academy of Sciences is the sort of torchbearer of the publications of every academy publishes journals, but the Indian Academy of Science journals is the largest number, and also probably, and this may be contentious, probably the most well-rated journals that they publish. So these are scientific journals. We also publish journals for popular science. One journal is called Resonance, which is called the Journal of Science Education, which is really rated very high, read by high school and college students, etc. And then we have dialogue where there are issues in science that emanate, or issues in society that emanate, where scientists must weigh in. Scientists must provide their points of view. So there are there's an online journal called Dialogue where this is what we do. Issues are brought to the fore, and different kinds of scientists from different domains, they actually participate. Then there is outreach program, and the outreach program, and also we train a large number of students from schools and colleges who do summer fellowships with us. So it's like the preparatory phase for their getting into a research and independent research at that. So the initial exposure is provided by the academies, and the Indian Academy of Sciences has been joined by the Indian National Science Academies and the National Academy of Sciences. So the Indian Academy of Sciences runs the three academies program, summer fellowship program, where last year it was bad. Last couple of years it was bad because there was no physical travel. But prior to that, almost every year we support for about 2 to 3 months 1,500 students from all over India, and we connect them to various laboratories depending on what their interests are, and they are mentored for those 2-3 months by faculty members of the institution where they are placed. So this is one niche area that's propelled by the Indian Academy of Sciences. The National Academy of Sciences works on women in science. So they work very much on women in science. They also have an outreach program in the tribal populations, etc. So social science and society programs are in a major way done by the National Academy of Sciences, which is headquartered in Prayagraj. The Indian National Science Academy, like I already told you, is the official academy that participates or engages in discussion with foreign academies, etc. In each of the academies also has other kinds of programs, and I've only told you some of the niche programs, but I can describe in more detail what the Indian Academy of Sciences does. We have other kinds of programs as well, but I'll stop here for now. That's how the three science academies run. They all pertain, they all work for the promotion and for upliftment of science and society. And there are various aspects to it. Each academy does one kind of work, so that there is no, clashes and no stamping of feet.
Thank you, Partha. Thank you for telling all the activities. In fact, from the publications, I know both the resonance and the dialogue to which I personally have contributed, and the fellowship, the student intern fellowships that I have taken advantage of with some of the students coming and working in my lab. Now, let's move to one of the interesting areas which you have mentioned, the role of science academies in making sure that the public understands what is going on and the right thing to do. Now, in addition to being the organization that advance science and technology, as we agree, science academies are also vital civil society organizations or institutions. And in that respect, they have a responsibility to inform the public, the ruling class, and our policymakers. Now, I know you mentioned some of them, the Citizen Science Charter and the science education panel that the Indian Science Academy, for example, have. But do you really think that our science academies have reached out to the greater public in fulfilling their role to the extent that they're supposed to? And the reason I ask this is several of our past activities, particularly related to certain contentious issues where the public looks at our science academies for advice, for facts, our academies have not fulfilled their roles to the extent that we expect them. Let's give an example of genetically modified organisms or GMOs. I would like to give a little bit of background to our viewers that India's first genetically modified vegetable biotech crop, brinjal, which was essentially engineered to bear the CRY1AC gene to provide resistance to the fruit and shoot borer, and with enormous scientific evidence that it is safe and effective, the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, the highest committee, in fact, has actually approved the crop. However, it was banned successively by the government. Although the same technology is successfully being used in Bangladesh since 2013 and also in Philippines. To the credit of our academies, there is a larger effort, or rather I should say there was a larger effort to come up with an unified voice that resulted in what was known as an inter-academy report in 2010. However, the report created more problems than provided solutions. It had many omissions in its first draft, which fortunately got revised and modified later. To be perfectly clear, the genesis of this inter-academy collaboration was not due to the efforts of the academy, but due to the effort of then Environment and Forest Minister, Mr. Jairam Ramesh, who met with the presidents of all three academies on March 19th of that year, 2010, and requested the academies actually to come up with a report and comment on the bill, which was then tabled under the name Biotechnology Regulatory Bill. With that background, Partha, do you think that our academies have reached out to the public? And I know they have done enormous amount of work, including your own when you were the president, but do you think they have reached out to the public enough, to our citizens, to provide information which is scientific and to eliminate fear for non-scientific afraidness or fear that actually exists?
So before I answer your question, let me also point out that it was not exactly Jairam Ramesh who brought the three academies together in 2010. The academies have been collaborating on various issues even before that. So that's really an incorrect perception that it was the government that brought the three academies together. It is true that Mr. Jairam Ramesh actually requested the three academies to come together and weigh in on this recombinant, BT brinjal, as they say. But prior to that, there was also a report of independent and the three academies together on the nuclear blasts and so on and so forth. So I won't get into the historical details. Come straight to your question. It's very interesting that you pointed out, you mentioned Bangladesh, and I'll tell you a personal encounter that I've had. There was around that time in 2015, there was a meeting that was hosted by the Bangladesh Academy of Sciences, and they invited a few people, and I was one of the invitees, and the Prime Minister of Bangladesh was there. And they were going to release the BT brinjal the next day. And we just so happened that got into a personal one-to-one conversation, and she said that you are not allowing the BT brinjal to be launched. Tomorrow we are launching BT brinjal. That was interesting that, while we actually provided much of the scientific background, the technology, etc., we are ourselves unable to bring it to the market or bring it to the farms while Bangladesh is doing this. To answer the bigger question, whether we inform the society and the public about the various progresses in science, the answer is yes and no. So yes part, I will emphatically say that through the journals, we do promote various kinds of science that's done not just in India, but also globally. Through various kinds of science outreach programs, and we have many of those through smaller workshops, etc. And again, every year we have over 100 of those. We continue, and when I say we, I'm essentially focusing on the Indian Academy of Sciences, which I know the best. So we do promote, and each of the academies does this. I have participated in going to tribal populations in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, along with the contingent that was taken by the National Academy of Sciences. We brought in, farmers from various islands in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and they came over, and we, told them about various kinds of ways of farming and other kinds of stuff. So anyway, the point that I'm making is that yes, modern science is relayed to the public, is communicated to the public by the academies. What is it that we don't do and we should be doing a little bit more? Oftentimes, like you mentioned about BT brinjal, there are oftentimes many issues that many decisions that are taken or recommendations that are made by various quarters to the government that impinges on national policy. Also, the government does a few things that may be anti-science. The government or even groups in the civil society may participate in some things or may indulge in some ways and means behavior that are probably anti-science. So here the academies do play a role, but again, I must say that the academies need to play a bigger role. We don't play as much role. Again, in terms of policy, in terms of whether a set recommendation is good or bad, you can imagine that it's not easy to bring people to a consensus opinion. Usually, the academies don't want to relay to the government or trumpet to the civil society that some notion or that's not a consensus opinion of the scientists of the academy or scientists who are fellows of the academy. Usually, divided opinion is not relayed. So oftentimes, even though we have internal discussions, the general public doesn't get to know, primarily because there is a divided house, which is quite often the case, and a divided house opinion is usually not relayed. Now, you might argue whether this is good or bad in a democratic society to attain a consensus and only then relay that information, but this is how the academies function anyway. I can provide you with an example that happened during my time. Again, I had taken the initiative to do that. During the pandemic, there was a lot of hesitation in public sharing of data. Data were being collected of various kinds, clinical, genomic, genome sequencing has now become a household word. And this is because people know that the value of genomic sequencing. So we were gathering lots of different kinds of data during the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. The data were being generated in various laboratories, scientific laboratories in India, but unfortunately the data were not being shared. And the reason for data sharing is that you can use those data to predict what the course of a pandemic might be. And that was in the hands of a few people with some limited repertoire of both knowledge and abilities. But the point that we were trying to make in the academy is that why not share this data openly such that many people can look at the data and come to certain kinds of useful conclusions that the government might actually want to use. But this was not being done. So the Fellowship of the Academy, the Council of the Academy of the Indian Academy of Sciences came together, and we actually put out a document, statement saying why are we hiding data and why we should not be hiding data. So hiding may not be the right word, not sharing data. I don't think there was a specific intent to hide the data. But so far as the general public is concerned, those who are interested in getting access to the data, the data were actually hidden. So I use the word hiding not in an active sense, but at least the data were not being shared. And we protested against that. We appealed to the government to provide, share the data, etc. Again, whether we impacted on the policy or on the viewpoint of the government, we think that we did not make a major impact because the data were not immediately shared. But again, the point is that, yeah, we do rise up to the occasion sometimes. We have discussions internally often, but we don't come out with statements as often as we should be doing. Again, that's because we don't want a divided opinion to percolate into society, but consensus is not easy to attain on most cases. So on many cases, I must say. So that's the reason why the civil society and others don't get to know what's going on in terms of these contentious issues that you mentioned in the academies. But we do discuss, but again, I think we should be doing more. Whether or not always a consensus opinion is the right thing to do, I have my own opinion about that. But again, so this is it.
Thank you, Partha. Thank you for telling some of the things that the academies are doing good and where there are scopes for improvement. And I can't agree with you more on, in a chaotic and loud democracy like ours, it's often very difficult to come to a consensus. Now, let's move to some of the controversies that the science academies have been landed into in the past and whether they have handled the issues properly. As you very well know, the known scientist Pushpamitra Bhargava, the founding director of the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology at Hyderabad, who is no more with us, had once resigned from the primary membership of all the three science academies in 1994. And when asked, he had told that the academies are ruled by the science mafias who did not let science grow in India. In fact, in a letter to the president of INSA, Dr. Bhargava had said that the Science Academy is, and I would like to quote, are by and large conservative and totally unconcerned about major social, economic, moral, or ethical issues that relate to science. Now, was he simply venting in the public, or is there any truth to what Dr. Bhargava was talking about?
I just mentioned that in the academies, we do discuss many things on the corridors in smaller subgroups, etc. But again, like I said, that usually only consensus opinion that's generated within the academy is relayed to the society. Now, if I did not like, if I just voted that, it should be the majority opinion that within the academy that should be relayed to the public. We don't have to arrive at a consensus opinion, because consensus opinion, like you pointed out, like I said, is very difficult to attain, very difficult to obtain. In that case, I'll be completely frustrated because we are trying to arrive at a consensus, and inability to do so means that we are unable to relay that to the civil society. That frustration might happen if I believe in majority rule, but whatever the reason, consensus opinion is oftentimes good because again, if we relay a divided opinion to the public, one segment of scientists might say, "Oh, this is completely wrong." They, they narrated provided a poor narrative of science that underlies this particular controversy. To avoid that, usually consensus opinion is sought. And Dr. Bhargava, of course, I knew him personally. I had great respect for him. He always felt that the academies were not doing enough in terms of exactly the kind of things that you quoted. And I'm pretty sure I wasn't a fellow, or maybe I was a fellow, but wasn't actively involved in affairs of the academies at that time. So maybe, even though those discussions were going on, consensus was not being achieved, and therefore it was not, and he was very upset about that, perhaps. But having said that, let me also point out another thing, and this again comes to the Indian Academy of Sciences. I'm pretty sure that there are similar examples from the other two academies also. the government of India now has a national policy for scientific conduct. And this whole issue about scientific conduct and the opposite side of the coin is scientific misconduct. How you need to be mindful of scientific misconduct that sometimes happens, done by the scientists, and what kind of actions need to be taken. This was thoroughly discussed in the Indian Academy of Sciences, and we came out. The Indian Academy of Sciences came out with a so-called white paper or a document that was the forerunner of the national policy. So oftentimes these kinds of things happen that, a national policy, we get to know the national policy, right? So there's the national data sharing policy. Binay, you and I have worked on that. So there are these policies, but these policies also have some background papers, and sometimes these background papers are either commissioned by the government of India or, from within the academies, they provide these background documents, background papers after sufficient discussion within the academy that form the preparatory documents for framing a national policy. And oftentimes the public in general does not get to know that. So again, I go back to what you mentioned about Dr. Bhargav, that Dr. Bhargav was, of course, a strong personality, as you may know and as I know. So he had his own points of view, and he's both right and wrong, in the sense he's right that we did not, the academies still do not make as much of a statement as societal statements as they probably should, influence policy, influence decision making of the government, and so on and so forth. But this entire policy of consensus opinion is what is oftentimes the bottleneck, and one who is not happy with this kind of bottlenecks may be frustrated, and I suspect that Dr. Bhargav was frustrated. Now he calls this as a science mafia. I don't really know. I have never felt that there was a science mafia for the long periods of time I've been in all of the academies. Of course, there are some people who are more vocal than others, whether we should call them as a science mafia, or if you don't agree with me, whether I should call you in the opposite camp and call you brand you as a member of the mafia, I don't know. So I will not get into that kind of a statement that Dr. Bhargav made. But having said that, I will also mention that there are some people in the council of each of the academies who have opinion, but they don't voice it. And there are some people who actually voice it very vociferously and very strongly. And therefore they stand out. And if their opinion doesn't agree with me, I might actually call them mafia. So don't.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Partha. I understand, and I think thank you for clarifying the issues and how difficult at times it is for all of us to come to a consensus. Now, this brings to another important topic. And in the context that you mentioned about the election of membership or the fellowship to the academy, I mean, the academy membership is rather given based on the criteria that to me may sound irrelevant. And let me elaborate. If I'm a good scientist, I have published good articles and sound papers, I'm considered as one of the experts in the field, my membership is considered as nominations, as you mentioned before, to the academies. Now, don't you think this is the time that we should revise the criteria for the membership for the academy? And I know this is a hypothetical question, but I ask you, being one of the leaders of the academy and being someone who was at the forefront of being exposed to all the activities all around. Now, if I am a good scientist, I publish well, I get promotions, I get accolades in my community. But as far as the membership of the academy is concerned, should we not look for a larger criteria? And the larger criteria is the contribution to the society and contribution in discussing scientific topics to the larger audience. So don't you think these are the issues we should actually be considering for the academy membership, rather than whether somebody has published well, whether somebody has been nominated and somebody has a good CV?
All right. So are you saying that science and society to the exclusion of good science, or in addition to good science?
In addition to good, because you have to be a good scientist in order to contribute to the society.
Right. So what should be given more weightage in electing somebody to the fellowship of an academy? First of all, let me say that this is not ignored. the science and society contribution is taken cognizance of more by the National Academy of Sciences and the Indian National Science Academy than by the Indian Academy of Sciences. So NASI and INSA pay more attention to science and society contributions than Indian Academy of Sciences. But having said that, Indian Academy of Sciences also pays attention to the science and society contributions. But again, these are bodies of scientists, and your science and society, so two things might happen. Science and society contributions are definitely much more difficult to judge, and there is a greater element of subjectivity. So in the smaller group, there are called sectional committees that are actually trying to evaluate people whether or not they have contributed, and they should be elected to the fellowship for their contributions. There is going to be a huge amount of subjectivity, and because of the subjectivity, even a majority is not going to attain. There will be fragmented groups. So that's very difficult. But that doesn't mean that we should shy away from considering these. That's my first point. My second point is that, and which is the most strong point, I really believe that these are academies of science, and to be elected as a fellow of the academy, you need to do good science. Now, if you do good science, of course, you get promotion, you get other kinds of accolades as well, you get a medal and so on and so forth. But again, there's no argument about saying that to be a fellow of a science academy, you have to first be a good scientist. If you have contributed to communicating science to society, upliftment of society through science, of course, you get brownie points. All three academies give you brownie points. They consider that. It's not like exclusion. But whether you want to bring in some people who are only social reformers using science or science communicators in society, INSA has one, the Indian National Science Academy has room for that. The National Academy of Sciences has room for that. The Indian Academy of Sciences does not have an exclusive room for such people. We might discuss this in more detail, but I must underscore that none of the science academies should shy away from considering contributions to science as the major criterion to elect a person to the fellowship of a society.
Thank you, Partha, for clarifying. And I think the interesting phenomenon that I would like to discuss with you, because this personally puzzles me, and I have my own views, but that's not important here. I would like to know yours. You know, there are scientific facts and fruits of science that we can see, feel, and enjoy due to the experiments and the theories that is brought together by various scientists. But there are still a lot of activities which are unexplained. Now, I am not mixing theology and science here. Let's take two of the greatest scientists and mathematicians of our time. One being Nikola Tesla, who is considered as the founding father of electrical engineering, and many of the fruits that we use today in household activities are directly related to what he has worked on. And the second, our own Srinivasan Ramanujan. Now, both of these figures, one, which is Tesla, believed in aliens, and Ramanujan believed in getting directly the order and all his equations from the goddess Namagiri. Now, this puzzled me in person. I still do not know whether this is right and wrong, because like any scientist, I believe in data. Now, don't you think this is an area which we believe or don't believe, something which should be discussed openly and taken a lead role by our science academies?
Yeah, I actually have views that are very confused. The reason why these are confused is that there are personal opinions that I keep private for myself and probably share it with a small coterie of friends. And there are opinions that are broader in nature that I would like to share with the more general public. Now, whether the belief in aliens or whether the belief in the goddess of Namakkal, these are personal matters, even though I must say that both of them have actually written them. So it is publicly documented that this is what they have written. Now, what do you do if a scientist? I think we should rise ourselves above all of these kinds of notions, all of these kinds of fears, But if a scientist who's made a lot of contribution to science does not actually rise above that, what can we do? Is there anything that, society can put pressure on them? Community of scientists can put pressure on them? These are personal views, and so honestly, I'm very confused. I don't know. I mean, your purpose of asking this question may be, how should we treat these scientists? I have no answer to that. All that I will say is that we should give them respect for the science that they have done, and for the aberrations, I would say, these aberrant ideas that they have. Maybe we should engage in personal discussions with them, hoping that we can rid them of these aberrant kinds of views that they have, which sometimes they even write down, and that those aberrant views also get percolated in society. So again, I mean, beyond this, I don't know what we can do.
Thank you, Partha. I understand that these are difficult topics. I just want the academies to engage with the public in this difficult topic. Now we're running short of time, but very quickly, if you don't mind, with a one-line answer, do you think that this is time our science academies merge into a single body with multiple different locations and serve in unison together to the public and the nation?
There has been talk of that. I'm not a believer of that, because I don't think that's going to achieve anything at all. Right now, the way that we have carved our own niche areas, I think we are playing a good role. Each academy has its own niche area and is playing one wonderful role. Bringing them together, merging them together into a single academy, I don't know how that's going to help. But there is a lot of talk in the government circles that the academies must be merged, and I have taken an opposition view on this, and communicated that to the Department of Science and Technology, including both in writing and verbally in a meeting. I don't know what they will do eventually, but I'm opposed to the merger.
Thank you, Partha. Thank you very much for your valuable time. We appreciate your time, and we would like to see you again. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.